Alright, what is up guys? VV back with another video. And in today's video, we're going to be knocking out part 6 of 7 in the Taking Your Game to the Next Level series. Alright, so let's just go ahead and get started here. So this is Gear Theory, part 6 of 7, Form 6, Nimon. And as usual guys, this is just meant to be an educational video. I'm just trying to help the new players get better. I'm trying to help the average players take their game to the next level. And I'm trying to, provide a place where the best players can leave their insights in the comment section below if that's what they want to do. That's just completely up to them. Okay, and of course, while this is focused on the One Piece TCG, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about in this video will probably apply to lots and lots of different card games. So some of it is more universal in its application. Okay, so we got to talk about this screen here for just a second. So Gears 1 and 2, remember, that was knowledge and experience. This is the core, part of the game that you have to basically, you're going to have to do, right? You can't move on from here. You can't go any further into the other gears, really, until you know how to play the game and you get some games in. And that's where the Gear 3, 4, and 5 come in to help you push to the next level, right? Where it's like, okay, so I know how the game works. I know how it functions, and I've even gotten a few games in, right? So now how can I get better and better and better? And that's where you look at Gears 3 through 5, and those deal with archetypes, okay? The mid-range, aggro, and control archetypes. Now, Gears 6 and 7, that is the final stages, right? That's why they're at the end, right? Gears 6 and 7, they are not archetypes, they are stereotypes. And, of course, I'm not going to go over every single stereotype, but I'm going to go over the ones that I think are most relevant to the flow of this entire presentation and, and go into detail with those. All right, guys? So hopefully I made that clear. That, again, Gears 1 and 2 is the building blocks. Gears 3 through 5 is learning about the archetypes that exist within the game. And Gears 6 and 7 are going to be geared towards stereotypes and, defining player mindsets and things like this. Okay? Okay, so Gear 6, Adaptation, we're talking about flexibility, malleability, and versatility. Okay, so the first character type, and this is going to be similar where we go green, yellow, red. So the indecisive one here, this is kind of a lot of beginners have this mindset because it comes with a lack of knowledge. And that's not meant to be an insult. It's just a general understanding that you don't know much about the game when you start. So you're probably going to be more indecisive. But some players may stay indecisive. I'm not saying you have to be some new player to have this kind of mindset. So, okay, let's go ahead and get into it here. Some players don't like being held down to a single style. Remember what we talked about in the last 3 videos, 3, 4, and 5. We talked about the different archetypes. Well, some people don't want to just stay mid-range forever. Some people don't want to stay control or aggro forever. They want to switch it up. Right? And that's fine. That's completely acceptable. You don't have to stay in one lane like that in this game. You can switch it up. And Gear 6 is kind of, the mentality is people who can relate most to Gear 6, that's probably going to be normal for them. Like over the course of their entire, let me back up. Like the Gear 6 players, they're big on adapting and being flexible. So, they might play aggro one day and control the next, right? Okay, so this gear, it kind of goes over the jack of all trades concept, okay? In other words, you kind of can play it all. Now, new and old players alike will benefit from switching up their styles on occasion, right? So it's not just the new players, and it's not players who just are in Gear 6. Again, when it comes to the very first segment of each one of these gears, they are meant to be understood for everyone. Like, for example, say someone just only plays mid-range. That's fine if that's what they want to do. But don't you think it would be beneficial if they tried a control deck or if they tried a different mid-range or a different aggro deck? And then they would know, oh, wow, certain things about this deck there's a weakness right here and there's a weakness right here. So when you learn how to pilot other decks, then you start to learn the strengths and weaknesses of each individual deck. It is a very good thing to partake in. I'm not saying you have to master it. We will go over the people who are basically have a mastery of Gear 6. We'll go over that at the end of the slide. It'll be the final slide on here. Okay, but this entry level is extremely important. So ultimately, there are players who default to Gear 6 because they simply don't know / can't decide what to play. And again, that is typically more on the newer side of players, because I will say this, generally speaking, when you get to this here, you are going to choose, oh, I prefer mid-range, or I prefer aggro, or I prefer control. There are some people, though, who don't want to be held down to one of those types, and that's completely fine. Like I said, there is nothing wrong with that. But that is probably, if I were to give a percentage estimate, I would say probably like something like 75 to somewhere between 75 to 90% of players are real big into just, yep, I'm going to play mid-range, aggro, or control. Okay, but for the players that don't do that, some of the more competitive players, of course, they're going to go further. So let's talk about Gear 6 here, the insatiable one. Okay, this personality type here I call the insatiable. Insatiable means it can, like, their thirst or their hunger cannot be satisfied. Okay? So while some people don't know what deck to play, remember we were just saying some people don't know what deck to play. That's why they default to being the indecisive one, and they play Gear 6 because they don't really know what to play. They're just trying to have fun. Like, look at all the leaders we looked at down here, right? Like, yeah, they might want to play Whitebeard, they might want to play Smoker, they might want to play Doflamingo, they might, and the next day play Queen. Like, all in that order, right? They might go from Queen to Smoker to Newgate to Doflamingo back to Queen. They might go all over the place, right? Because they just don't know what to play. Then there are the people who they just want to know how to play every deck, right? They will use Gear 6 as like basically a building block on Gears 2 through 5. You see what I'm saying? Because you want to get your reps in, you want to learn how to do mid-range, you want to learn how to do aggro, you want to learn how to do control. So they use Gear 6 specifically as like a scholarly tool, right? And I call them the insatiable. Like they can't just stick to one. No, I have to play. I have to be the best at mid-range. Mid-range. I have to be the best at control. I have to be the best at aggro. I have to be the best at every single different color in the game. All that good stuff, right? Those people exist. They're out there, and it's an understandable desire, right? It is an understandable desire. It's actually a pretty attractive mindset to, like, okay, I'm a student of the game, and that's one thing I want to relate to the insatiable personality type. I was going to call it the student or the scholar or the pupil, right? Like this person who's seeking a greater education, but I didn't want to do that for one specific reason. We are all students of the game. I don't care how good someone is, I don't care how bad someone is, or how in between they are. Everyone who plays this game needs to think of themselves as being a student of the game, right? You hear that in professional sports as well, right? Like, okay, yeah, you know, I might be a basketball coach, but I'll always be a student of the game, and I'm always learning and learning and learning. As an educator, that's a big deal for me, right? Where, you know, there's just constant, endless amounts of certifications and stuff that teachers have to renew and have to do just to keep things going, to keep their license up, okay? But long story short, I didn't want to use that name because it's too applicable to everything. But the insatiable I felt was a little more accurate. So let's keep going. So a single deck or playstyle just isn't enough to keep some players interested in a game. Okay, that's not a problem, right? That's really not a problem. So just play more decks, play different types. So in other words, they keep trying new decks. A player who can run the gauntlet, let me talk about that in a second. A player who can run the gauntlet is a very good player to have in your group, in your friend group. Whether it be you or whether it be a friend. So what is a gauntlet? So notice these little pictures I have down here at the bottom. Okay, you see the three leaders. They have numbers over their head. So over on the far right here, there's something called a gauntlet. Now, it's not really used anymore because of technological advancement, but back in the day playing Magic the Gathering, once the meta had been established, and I need to talk about that for a second. What does meta mean? What is meta? Meta is referring to the state of the game, like which decks are winning. Like let's go back to this previous slide here. So currently, at the time of me recording this, all three of these decks are fairly good. Like Whitebeard, of course, is in the like tier 1 category. Queen and Doflamingo are kind of tier 1.5. Now Smoker's probably tier 2 or lower. I'm not sure. Maybe 1.5. Someone might be able to argue 1.5. But, you know, not trying to get too picky here. Just trying to give an example. So in the meta, you see how there's the metaverse? It's like it's the universe within the card game. In the metaverse of One Piece TCG, there is Edward Newgate as one of the absolute best decks in the format. And then slightly below that, you have Queen and Doflamingo and many other decks, by the way, that consist of the entire meta. Okay, so when I say meta, that's what I'm referring to. Now, with a gauntlet, here's what you do. You take the 3 best decks of the format, or maybe even the top 4 or 5, however many you want to put in one deck, and you number them. So let's just use this as an example. I'm not saying Rob Lucci is one of the best decks in the format. I'm just using this as an example here. So let's say we make Charlotte Katakuri the first deck, Trafalgar Law the second deck, and Rob Lucci the third deck. So back in the day, before technology, before a lot of technological advancement, and I say back in the day, I'm referring to about 10 to 15 years ago, back when I first started playing TCGs competitively. Well, there were no programs to play Magic on. Well, there was one. I'm not going to get into that. It was just easier to do this. And I'm not going to lie, there's really no substitute for just hands-on experience. The digital format, to me, I'll probably have to dedicate an entire video to. I'm not a huge fan of. But all right, let me not go off the rabbit trail here. Let me not go on a random rabbit trail. So what we would do, me and my brother in particular, we would create what was called a gauntlet. Okay, and I don't know why it was called that, but that's what they called it. So anyway, long story short, let's just say Katakuri, Trafalgar Law, and Rob Lucci are the best decks in the format. You see these 3 leaders here? So we would roll a 6-sided dice. If it was 1 or 2, we would have to play against the Katakuri deck. If it was 3 or 4, the Law deck, and 4 and then 5 and 6, Lucci, right? Well, what if I don't have all the cards for these decks, which is very likely, which was the case back in the day. Especially if I had a deck already made of one of these, just so I could test against them. Well, what we would do is we would have a card in a sleeve. Notice the card behind these little, behind this white paper here that says 7-cost Linlin, 5-cost Stanlaw, and 4-cost Porcelino. We would have just some random crappy card that we didn't care about in the back of a sleeve. And then we would print out an entire list like this of a deck. So in other words, say I got a 1 where I'm playing against Katakuri. Well, I would shuffle an entire deck made in this format where it was, in this case, it's a 1 through 50 deck, right? Like for One Piece. So it would have 7 costs Charlotte Linlin for this card if I drew it. Do you understand? Hopefully that made sense. That it's really hard to explain. But long story short, you would print out an entire deck list of all of the decks you want to play test, and then keep them in the same orientation where number 1 is up here, number 2 is here, number 3 is here. And you'd have whatever relevant information you wanted on them. So that way, your opponent, your playtesting partner, he would have every deck in his hand currently. So you would roll the dice, and whatever you got, let's say I got a 6 this time. Okay, well now I have to go against deck 3 against Rob Lucci. So now he doesn't even have to change his deck, and I obviously don't have to change my deck because I'm the one who's playtesting against it. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too complicated of an example. I know that was very clumsy the way I said that, but it was an old method we would use to help get better and better at the game and get better and better against each individual matchups and be able to make meta decisions to make decks better. So long story short, a player who is good at Gear 6 and who's very flexible and can adapt and is malleable and versatile, they can play any deck in the format. So if you need specific playtesting against a certain deck type, it's really nice to be able to have someone like that in your group. Okay, so let's keep going. Next up is the competitor. Okay, this person's mindset is, I just want to play what wins. So in other words, if you just want to play what wins, you have to be able to play every single deck type, right? You have to be able to play aggro, control, mid-range, red, blue, black, purple, yellow, green, you name it. It doesn't matter. You have to be able to play it. So this final version of Gear 6 that we're going to talk about is the competitor. So let me read this. And then there is the player who just wants to play whatever wins, just like I said. Someone else, this is their mindset. Someone else has already figured out what wins, so I'm just going to use that, right? There is no creativity involved. Like, they might make a few meta decisions on the fly, like, change out one card for another. Maybe they don't have all the cards they need, so they swap out one card for another. That's about it, though. There's not so much creativity. That's what creativity we're going to get into in Gear 7. Gear 6 is not so much about creativity mindsets and personality types. It's more about being flexible and being able to go with the flow and things like that. Not to say that, there's always going to be some overlap, of course, guys. There's always going to be some overlap when it comes to personality types, but hopefully I made enough sense there. The Gear 6 players are all about adapting, being flexible, being malleable, and being versatile, where they can just kind of play whatever. And it's not that they're making whatever deck, it's that they know the deck exists, and they're just going to play it so they can have the best results possible, typically speaking. So this pertains to the idea of flavor of the month decks, FOTM, flavor of the month, or net decking. Okay, that's like a bad word sometimes, this word right here, net decking. What that means is it's kind of like a low-key insult, not always, but sometimes it's used as a low-key insult where it's like, oh yeah, all that guy does is net deck the best decks and plays those. That might seem like a foreign concept to some people, like, well, yeah, why wouldn't I do that if we know the deck wins? Well, what it's saying is you're not creative enough to make your own deck, so you had to rely on someone else to make a deck that would win for you. And now, not just that, that's part one of the insult. Part two is you couldn't win otherwise. You understand what's going on there. So flavor of the month is the same concept of, okay, well, you're just playing what's winning right now. You're just playing the good deck currently. Okay, so typically speaking, this is a go-to mentality if you want to take place in a large tournament. Notice all these cards at the bottom. Excuse me. These are super pre-release winners, serialized winner cards, and championship winner cards over on the far right. And it's like, a lot of people are playing this game as hopefully to be a means of sustenance, like where they can make money off of it and survive off of it. I come at this game in a different angle, right? Because I have a full-time job. This game is not my job. This is just a passion of mine. So so let me say this. Excuse me. When it comes to Gear 6 for me, it's not that I can't play every different deck, and that's not the point at all ever for what I'm saying, right? It's not that no one else can do it except Gear 6 people. Gear 6 is just what you're using to help get better at using all the decks and being able to swap in between them seamlessly so that you can have a competitor's edge on other players in the format because you can just play whatever deck at a higher level than them, right? But the thing for me is, and we're going to talk about it more next video, Gear 7 is kind of where I reside. And it's not that like, oh, so you're saying you're the best? No. Do not misunderstand what these gears are for, right? So, for example, I would consider Gear 1 and 2 something everyone needs to master, and I have a pretty decent amount of mastery into Gear 1 where I could probably be a judge if I decided to take the test. Excuse me. But Gear 2... I don't really go to big tournaments. I don't really have the time to go do that. So I'm probably just intermediate, or probably very high intermediate with Gear 2. But some people might argue, well, no, because you've been playing so long, it might count as expert level, which is possible. It is possible. But I would still consider myself probably just, when it comes to One Piece in particular, I would still consider myself Gear 2 for experience. Then you get into the Gears 3 through 5. Gear 5 is where I dwell. That's not to say I can't play at Gear 3 or Gear 4. It's just that I like to sit at Gear 5. So it's just like in a car, right? If you're going through the gears, this is manual, old analog type cars, the manual shifter cars. You might feel comfortable in a certain gear. Well, for me, it's Gear 5. And then when it comes to Gear 6 and 7, that is specifically a choice by you, the player, the individual. I choose the more innovative play style. Other players don't, and that's not a big deal. And I call it the Joker because you never know what you're going to get, right? One day the player might be playing Law. The next week they're playing Katakuri. The next week they're playing Queen. The next week they're playing Zoro. You just have no idea. It's just, like I said, they're a jack of all trades, and they're kind of like this Joker as well, where you just don't know what they're going to come at you with next. And that's good too, right? Like that does, like it's predictable that they're going to play a top tier deck typically, but it's unpredictable in the sense that, well, they know how to play an aggro, mid-range, or control deck at the highest level, so I don't know what they're going to play, even though I know it's going to be a top-tier deck. Does that make sense? So anyway, hopefully you guys got something out of that and it made sense. If there's any confusion or any questions, please don't hesitate to comment in the comment section below. And that's about it, guys. Like, that's the final slide here. Over on for this competitor slide, this is the final slide of this one. So if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and join the Discord if you want to hang out and chat with us. You know, it's a pretty decent little Discord going on right now, and it's only getting bigger, which is very exciting. And as usual, guys, I really appreciate y'all. And until next time, peace.